What if one of the most debated mysteries in the Bible was actually solved by a science that did not exist until 25 years ago, and the proof came from a tribe of African warriors nobody expected? For generations, the Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa lived with a history that mainstream academia refused to write down. Scattered across southern Africa, this community of roughly 80,000 individuals maintained a lifestyle that sharply separated them from neighboring Bantu populations. While surrounding communities followed local traditions, the Lemba observed strict rules. They refused to eat pork, practiced careful ritual animal slaughter, and set aside a weekly sacred day of rest. These customs were not random cultural quirks. They were active, daily links to a vanished homeland. According to their oldest songs and oral genealogies, their ancestors were Jews who fled a Middle Eastern city called Senna, crossed the ocean, and carried a sacred, heavy wooden object known as the Ngoma Lungundu, a relic described in terms that closely mirror the biblical Ark of the Covenant. For nearly a century, Western anthropologists who visited the region documented these practices but filed them away as mere folklore. The idea of a lost Jewish clan surviving in the heart of Africa was treated as a historical impossibility, a myth born of cultural diffusion or colonial influence rather than genuine memory. But the Lemba insisted their bloodline was distinct, preserving their identity through strict endogamy. They waited for a time when the rest of the world would look outside the limits of paper records to find the truth of their origin. In 1999, Tudor Parfitt, a professor of modern Jewish studies at the University of London, set out to test the Lemba's oral tradition using a science that was only just emerging. Working alongside geneticist Mark Thomas and an international research team, Parfitt collected DNA samples from Lemba men to analyze their Y chromosomes, which are passed down directly from father to son. The team was looking for a specific genetic signature, the Cohen modal haplotype, a pattern of 6 genetic markers highly concentrated in Jewish Kohanim, the hereditary priestly class. When the laboratory results came back, they forced a complete reassessment of the African oral tradition. In the general Lemba population, Semitic paternal markers were highly visible. But in the Buba clan, the very group that had claimed priestly status for generations, the Cohen modal haplotype appeared in over 50% of the men. This frequency matched, and in some cases exceeded, the rates found among Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jewish priests in Europe and the Middle East. Published in the American Journal of Human Genetics in 2000 and featured in a major BBC documentary, these findings presented a statistical anomaly that could not be easily explained away as a coincidence. By the exact genetic standard used to identify Jewish priestly lineages worldwide, the Buba clan possessed a clear, measurable connection to the ancient Near East. The genetic data had caught up to the oral history, turning what had long been dismissed as tribal folklore into a serious, measurable historical inquiry. The genetic data redirected attention to the Lemba's oldest oral historical clue, the ancestral city of Senna. For generations, this name existed only in memory, but the geographic search pointed directly toward the southern coast of the Arabian Peninsula. On the coast of modern-day Yemen sit the ancient ruins of Kana. Around 700 BCE, Kana operated as a major hub for the global incense trade, linking the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean. Historical records and archaeological excavations here revealed a diverse network of merchants, including Jewish trading communities established along these coastal ports. These merchants operated within a sophisticated logistics network, moving high-value commodities like frankincense and metal across vast desert and maritime routes. When geneticists analyzed the Y chromosomes of modern Yemeni Jewish populations, they identified the exact same paternal haplogroups, specifically J1M267, found in the Lemba's Semitic lineage. This genetic overlap transformed a vague tribal legend into a concrete, testable historical corridor. For over a decade, Tudor Parfitt physically retraced this route, traveling from Yemen down the East African coast and into the African interior. The investigation, which he documented in his 2008 book, The Lost Ark of the Covenant, followed the logical pathways of the ancient Tao trade winds and river valleys leading toward Zimbabwe. It was a route where small groups of Near Eastern merchants, traveling along the incense trade networks, could have gradually integrated with local Bantu-speaking populations, leaving their paternal DNA as a permanent signature across the generations. Inside the Harare Museum of Human Sciences in Zimbabwe lies a physical object that grounds the Lemba's oral tradition in material reality. This is the Ngoma Lungundu, a large wooden vessel treated by the community not as a musical instrument, but as a sacred sanctuary. For generations, the Lemba maintained strict protocols for its custody, handling it with extreme reverence and ensuring it never touched the ground. In 2010, researchers sent a fragment of the artifact's wooden core to Oxford University for radiocarbon dating. The analysis placed the wood at approximately 700 BCE, a date that falls squarely within the era when Israelite priests performed rituals in Jerusalem, decades before the Babylonian destruction of 586 BCE. Physical examinations of the Ngoma revealed layers of careful repair using different indigenous woods and metal fittings, showing that the object was systematically preserved and rebuilt over centuries as an irreplaceable relic. Tudor Parfit argued that an original ark-like object may have been carried out of Jerusalem prior to the Babylonian invasion, traveling down ancient trade routes where it was gradually modified to survive the journey. He noted that this scenario matches accounts in the biblical Book of Chronicles, which describe the sacred ark being relocated shortly before the city fell. Rather than a mere legend, the physical survival and ancient core of the Ngoma suggest a preserved material link carried across continents by those sworn to protect it. The genetic patterns identified in the Lemba do not stand in isolation. Further north, the Beta Israel community of Ethiopia presents a parallel genetic record. A 2012 study published in PLOS One analyzed Y chromosome markers within this Ethiopian Jewish population, finding paternal lineages that connect them to ancient Middle Eastern groups. The genetic distance between the Beta Israel and neighboring non-Jewish Ethiopian populations indicates a genuine, ancient separation, rather than a simple cultural adoption. This pattern fits within broader breakthroughs in ancient genomics. In 2020, researchers from Harvard Medical School and the Broad Institute analyzed ancient DNA from sites across Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. The data revealed that modern Jewish populations share a genetic core that traces back to the southern Levant around 1000 BCE. Together, these genetic markers show that biblical genealogies and oral migrations reflect real, historical population movements preserved across 2,000 years of diaspora. The case for the Lemba's origins does not rest on a single genetic marker or a solitary artifact, but on how these diverse lines of evidence converge. This cumulative record forced a major reassessment in academia, where oral traditions were once routinely dismissed as mere folklore. Yet responsible science requires acknowledging the physical limits of the data. Y chromosome testing traces only direct paternal ancestry, leaving maternal lineages and broader genetic mixing unmapped. At the same time, localized sample sizes, high mutation rates, and genetic drift demand caution. Ethical research also hinges on informed consent and shared custodianship of both sensitive DNA samples and preserved cultural heirlooms. Ultimately, the genetic mapping does not validate every biblical narrative, but it strongly suggests that ancient genealogies recorded real historical migrations and authentic priestly lineages. With genetic tools constantly refining, the Lemba study raises a clear question: how many other lost chapters of biblical history are waiting to be read in the modern genome? Today, the Lemba's genome proves that oral history can outlast empires. As genetic science advances, it continuously bridges the gap between scripture and historical reality, revealing that ancient lineages are anchored in real human dust. Science is finally catching up to faith. Share your thoughts in the comments below.